to support learner agency, and in particular, in light of the challenges we're all facing in COVID. It goes back to an article we wrote for ASC Pakistan a couple of years ago. The testing craze is everywhere. We hear you complaining about it. We hear you complaining about the controlled curriculum designed to deliver the content and not really think about learning. So we wrote this piece called Learners Are More Than a Score, where we wanted to really focus on the fact that teaching and learning is not really just a question of what teachers do only. It's a question of acknowledging learner agency. And it's a question of making sure that learners are hearing lots of different kinds of feedback, not just from the teacher on how they're doing, but from one another, from self-reflection, and from the larger community. There's a link down at the bottom there to that article. If you just search Kubik and Laur, Learners Are More Than a Score, you'll be able to see it. This has become a really important part of our work with teachers, especially now with the advent of blended learning environments and classrooms in COVID. Dayna.
So Tim, I think you need to go ahead and do the slideshow share.
Yeah, it has to be
the screen.
It's only if you can make it bigger.
Now do you see
there
it?
You go.
Yeah, I didn't realize I'd paused it, but it said, yeah, thank you for letting me know.
No, I'm usually the one that's running the slides, and I had a major computer fail earlier this week, so I just got a new computer last night and wasn't sure that it was going to be here, so he gets all the pressure, so thanks, Tim, for that. So, you know, as Tim mentioned with the whole issue with COVID, we as educators found ourselves in a space and a place back in March where we said, uh-oh, what's going on here? And so if Tim goes back a slide.
I don't know why. There we go. I'm just going to
stay away. We'll get it. We'll get it worked out. See, Tim's in Colorado. I'm in Pennsylvania. You know, we're learning all the virtual things here. But we all found ourselves in this place where we had to, as educators, all of a sudden be thrust into this design of remote or online learning. And what Tim and I really focus on, as Felicia mentioned in the beginning, is this authentic project learning experiences, because what we want to do is empower our learners through the process. And all of a sudden, as educators were displaced, we had lots of educators that were coming to us, as well as we were seeing through Twitter and LinkedIn and on Facebook groups. You know, teachers were really wondering, how can we design these remote or online authentic project learning experiences so that we did empower learners as they were being displaced? And as you see this question, I'm sure you're all thinking, all right, this leads me to a lot of inquiry questions too. And we would encourage you throughout this presentation that go ahead and type them in the chat. We would love to hear what those questions are, and we'll see what kind of themes emerge at the end of the presentation. But Tim and I can already predict what some of those questions might be. You know, you've got some very authentic questions looking at, well, all right, Dayna, tell me, what do you mean by authentic project learning experiences? Or what do our kids need right now in this moment? We've got some very relevant questions too, saying, okay, I'm not even sure how I assess my students online, or how do I engage my students online? And then we can have some more complex questions too, thinking about, all right, how do we connect with our experts and how do we provide resources for them?
And that's really the nature of the work that we try to do at Project ARC around the projects we work on with students. Authenticity has got to be something real, but that's not necessarily the same thing as relevancy. And I think that's a point that's often missed in a lot of project work that teachers and community partners attempt to do with students, is they sometimes pick a project that is very real, but absolutely irrelevant to children, both in terms of what their interests are, and also in terms of what their developmental ability is. But likewise, many teachers will try to do what we like to call entertainment, right? They'll try to train the kids with something entertaining by picking something that's really relevant, but obviously a false project to work on. It's not really going to make any difference in their lives. And when you put those two things together, if you have a project that is really real for kids and is relevant to the kids, then a whole new level of complexity emerges out of the dynamics that go on when kids are trying to figure out how to tackle a real issue that matters to them. And that's the kind of deeper learning that I think all of us are talking about when we want to see project-based learning, or as we like to call them, authentic project learning experiences, be successful. All right, next slide. There we go.
And so you probably noticed on the left-hand side of the screen, these little icons that have been popping up so far. And we use something called the 5 stages of project assessment that I wrote about in a couple of my most recently published books on authentic project learning experiences. And so we see these stages not necessarily as a linear pattern. It's easy to put it linearly on the screen, but as you introduce a challenge, and then we heard in the last presentation, one of the gentlemen was talking about how inquiry is so important, so that we're not just telling our students what it is that they need to know, but they're diving deep into that. They're getting a variety of different perspectives through that, so it's not very tunnel vision as they interact with different content and technical and subject matter experts. And as they solve their challenges, we know that every action has a consequence, and we're certainly seeing us live that out as a global society currently. And whatever solution that they develop to the challenge, depending on what options they take, there will be some further opportunities for them to explore that. So that's the 30-second high-level view of the 5 stages of project assessment that we use, but you'll see these icons continue to pop up through the presentation.
And I'll add as we move on that it does look a lot like the design cycles you may have seen this morning in some other presentations, but our key focus is not sort of on what teachers are doing, but thinking about what students or learners are doing in each of those stages and the types of assessments that are appropriate. And that's really what we want to focus on as we move forward.
And so really the core of this presentation is looking at the lens of SAMR as we think about that remote or online instruction and feedback loops that we can provide to students as we do that through technology pieces. And some of you are probably very familiar with SAMR, maybe some of you, this is a little bit new, but to give you a very quick example, we're all using Zoom right now. And so at that substitution phase where we're using a direct tool substitution, we would use Zoom simply for that direct instruction lecture type of a piece. And in my daughter's school system, we just got the email that we're going remote to start the year. And they said, every day there will be a direct instruction Zoom meeting for every class. It's very low level substitution. In the augmentation phase, we're still using that direct tool substitution, but there is some improvement. So for instance, here we're using the chat feature. So if someone has a question, it's like raising a hand in class, you can ask the question, the teacher can respond to it. So there is some improvement with the tool. Then we get to that modification where we have the ability to redesign tasks significantly. So if we're using Zoom and let's say we throw a poll up to get immediate feedback on needs, we can adjust our instruction, pull up the interactive whiteboards on Zoom, and we can meet the needs of our students based on the feedback that we're receiving from them. Then we can get to that very, very high level of redefinition. That means it is something that was previously inconceivable, but we can create new tasks. So in a remote learning experience now through using Zoom, we could run cafe conversations, put students into breakout rooms, have conversations, bring them back based on the conversations that we've had, develop some themes to move forward and use that feedback to determine what kind of additional instruction that needs to occur.
So what Dayna and I have been working on this spring as we support teachers on this question is really helping them look at different technology platforms, both with a focus on teacher practice, because teachers are obviously still making decisions about how they're going to engage in remote or blended learning as we head into the next school year, but also thinking about learner agency and the types of things that students can do, because they're more than a score that is a result of teacher practice. They're agents in the classroom that can take technology tools, in part because of their status as digital natives, and actually work their way up the SAMR framework to a point where they're getting way more feedback than if it was just the teacher making an assignment and then providing them a score on the work. And so we're going to walk you through this framework. These two graphics that you see there are also available. Felicia has them that she can send out to anyone who is interested in looking at a deeper level. But we're going to take a deep dive into two in the context of another project we've been working on with a partner here in the States.
Yeah, so at the whole start of the shutdown, as teachers were in a panic, immediately my mind went to, this is an authentic project learning experience in the making. And so I wrote an article on LinkedIn to say, we have this challenge. How can we rebuild our country's infrastructure? Whether you're here in the US, you're in Canada, you're somewhere in Europe, in Asia, it doesn't matter, to handle a future worldwide crisis. And this particular challenge can then be tailored to the content area that you teach, whether it's math, science, we could use ELA, social studies, you name it, it's all encompassed in there. And so we're gonna look at the SAMR framework and the different tools through the lens of this project, and you'll see me here in just a little bit discuss some of those tools, and then we'll hop back to the slide a little bit later in the presentation.
Cool. So as an example, Dayna already touched on the Zoom experience, and there's a way in which you can use Zoom in a more complex way than just holding a class discussion, and she sort of went over that. But what we want to frame here is that the kind of work that students can do with writing, for example, as the first one. Yes, a teacher can assign them to write a paragraph or a short paper or an opinion piece or something like that, and turn that into the teacher. And that's using word processing tools very much to do the kind of work that teachers have always done, but that also offers a very limited amount of feedback. The feedback is really not, not only is the work one-dimensional, but the feedback that students get is one-dimensional. As soon as you move into a blog space, there's a potential that other people will comment in the blog, especially if you help to set that up as a teacher. And now the feedback the student is getting is a little bit more diverse. Same thing as you move up the SAMR schedule through modification and redefinition, the more students are doing collaborative writing, the more they're getting immediate feedback that isn't delayed in the same way that a teacher who says, write a 5-paragraph essay for me and turn it in, and oh yeah, I'll get the grades back to you in a couple of weeks. Now we're dealing with a lot of feedback that not only includes peers, possible outside community members, but also hopefully like subject matter experts that the teacher has worked out with. And I think that's something that Rosina talked in her work as not being a teacher, like bringing those experts in together. Another version down below on discussion, and then Dayna will talk about a couple of examples that we use in our infrastructure project. Yes, Zoom is a great way for having a conversation, but I think all of us, even 2 or 3 months into this pandemic, are suffering from all sorts of Zoom fatigue. And so it's really important that students not only experience Zoom as a substitution for class discussion, but have some asynchronous opportunities where they get a chance to engage in feedback rather than just listening to other people talk. Padlet basically is a class discussion where you're writing on Post-it notes in a virtual space. Back channel chat, very similar to what really happens on Twitter a lot of times when people are doing a workshop like this. On my phone, I'm seeing some things are getting posted out on LinkedIn and other places. Back channel chat is a safe and secure place where you can do that with students, so you don't have to worry about the whole world seeing what you're talking about. And then Etherpad is another higher level version similar to Google Docs, but actually allowing a lot more functionality, and Dayna will talk about that in her example.
So in our infrastructure project, as we were thinking through how this might look in an online space, we had that high level question about redesigning the infrastructure of our country. And in this example, we would want our students to go back to that vital question, and we want them to share some ideas that they might have so that we get some different perspectives and they get feedback on those perspectives, and they can do that in Etherpad or Google Docs. My preference is Etherpad because it's like Google Docs on steroids, and every kid gets assigned a color. I might have 5 different conversations that are going on at a different time. I would say, hey guys, Mrs. Laur, I have purple, no one else takes purple, and I can hop through all of the different discussions that are occurring, and I can read in real time what is happening with that conversation. I can see the colors, so I can see that Jose is saying this, I can see that Sally is saying this, and this particular student has jumped in and asked this question, but I feel like a particular student needs some help, or the group as a whole needs help, so that I can ask my questions. And the best part about it is that whole conversation, I can see it play out in real time as I go back and replay it. I can see who deleted something, who added something. And so even though I'm not in the same room with everyone, the kids aren't in the same room with everyone, they are having this very interactive conversation, giving feedback to one another. And then it gives me the opportunity to give immediate feedback and then also give delayed feedback as I go back and read the entire conversation.
And all of that is a vast improvement over trying to have this same kind of idea raising or brainstorming conversation via a Zoom channel, where a lot of students will probably check out at some point because they're not really part of the action. Not to belabor the point, but we'll look at one more sort of example. This one more from the teacher side of things in terms of thinking about lessons. There are a lot of platforms out there that allow us to broadcast lectures. And some schools are choosing to go that direction, some classrooms, some universities. But there are many other platforms that move from simply broadcasting content out to, for example, global youth debates, being involved in asynchronous debates about ideas and issues, or solvably where it's more problem focused rather than topic focused. And kids can get access to the content that they need, but in a more dynamic, interactive space, as opposed to just being told, as Dayna's daughters have been told, to like log in and listen to a teacher talk for 45 minutes every day. Classroom management is also a question we get a lot about in terms of working on authentic project learning in remote learning environments. A lot of teachers and increasingly a lot of corporations are relying on automated reminder systems that basically ping students or ping employees saying, you have to do this now, right? Whether it's get up and walk for 1,000 paces or do your homework or whatever. That's a very sort of tailorist approach to classroom management. It's doing what teachers have always done. They write what needs to be done on the board and then they stand there and make sure that kids do it. Trello is a step in the right direction. It allows kids to take more control over their workflow and sort of, here are the things we need to get done. Here's how we propose to do it. But you can take that up a level further through something like Google Classroom, or we like Real World Scholars, where they can engage in some of that planning in collaboration with technical experts from the community who've offered their services to help out. There are numerous other platforms like this around the world. That's just one that we chose. So Dayna, on to the next example.
Yeah, so as we're talking about the infrastructure piece, so me as the classroom teacher, I have a very limited view in terms of the technical expertise, because unless I actually worked in a field outside of education, I am the content area expert in terms of education, and maybe I am certified because I took X number of credits in something, but our students need that feedback from technical experts. So when you engage with those technical experts through something like Real World Scholars that promotes entrepreneurship and will give students the web space to start their own companies and connect them with technical experts through a collaboration with NEPRIS, now you have the ability to bring in an additional perspective, a new context, so that students can really think about the consequences of their actions, and if they take a certain pathway, what might happen, because those technical experts can give them that higher level feedback than a teacher might be able to do. Because if I teach biology, I have the credits in biology, but I probably was never out in the field working as a biologist per se. So building that into the platform is really important. And now that we have lots of technical experts that are working from home, they really have the desire to interact with students. I know my husband personally, who typically would spend 50% of his time out in the field doing work, is now behind the computer 100% of the time at home, and he would give anything to interact with students to do environmental science work and provide them with feedback on projects. So we've got lots of those experts that are out there and willing to give their time, and now we really have the platforms for them to do so as well. So let's come back very quickly here, of course, to our infrastructure project. And we did want to mention that we set this project up on Headrush. So the Headrush learning management system was designed specifically for project-based learning, and Headrush has given us the opportunity to offer to any of you access to the project if you would like that. Of course, you can go into the LinkedIn article that had the URL a little bit earlier in the presentation and read more about it. Here we've set it up directly in Headrush, aligned it to the 5 stages in different areas where you can provide feedback, how you can provide feedback via some of those higher level SAMR tools as well.
And if you are interested in getting access to that course, just to sort of see our design principles in action, you can just email us at info@projarc.com, and that'll be up on our final slide. And Headrush has given us permission to let 20 different educators from around the world in to sort of see what we're up to for free. So we're happy to share that with you. Dayna mentioned earlier that one of the things that we really like to do with learners to increase feedback is cafe conversations based on the World Cafe model, and where a group of students or a group of practitioners gets together, tackles some questions while mixing it up in different groups, so you hear lots of different perspectives. If you're familiar with that model, you know how powerful it is. And we'd like to invite any of you who are interested on Wednesday, July 22nd from 9 in the morning till 11 in the morning, Mountain Daylight Time. We're going to be holding a cafe for educators who are tackling the question of participatory leadership and authentic collaboration in this time of incredible educational displacement. And yes, I suspect very much like Felicia, we are doing this because the conference we had planned for this week was literally displaced because Philadelphia is closed until February. So we can't meet in Philadelphia. We're going to meet virtually instead. I think we finished up with a good amount of time to allow some opportunity for questions, and I look forward to seeing what those questions